Well, fittingly, Dane Swan began what was a very serious announcement with a joke.
Pretty big crowd for a one-year deal, isn't it?
But for many, most notably his father Billy, this was a sad occasion. A very serious foot injury means Swan has had to call time on his career a little earlier than he would have liked. And it certainly was a grand retirement. You know, it's a big deal when Nathan Buckley, Mick Malthouse and Eddie Maguire are side by side.
One of the great characters, good story, shouldn't be worried about the ending because what starts is going to finish at some stage, and just one of those players that I'll always remember because heart and soul, a lot of things that a lot of people don't know that I know about him as far as his makeup, and it was a pleasure to coach him.
He's one of the greatest players in the history of this club. He's the player of his generation.
He definitely looked after everything that was in his control over his years and was so much more than just an on-field player, but that's where he shone, and his pride and respect for the jumper he pulled on and his teammates that he represented and the club that he represented shone through every time he played.
Having been plucked with pick 58 in the 2001 National Draft, Swan went on to have one of the great Collingwood careers, 258 games, which included a premiership, a Brownlow medal, 5 All-Australians and 3 Copeland trophies. But it could have been all over before it almost began, due to a very serious off-field indiscretion in the early days.
I thought I was going to be sacked, and after that blow I got into, and obviously got to the meeting, and Mick just sort of said, "This is your last chance," which since I've proven him wrong, so I've had more than one since. But
when your son gets drafted, you see his photo in the paper, you think, "God, this is fantastic," and having your kids in the paper. But then after a while, you just dread opening the paper and thinking, "Oh God, he's not on the front. He's not in the paper again, is he?"
Swan has certainly done things a little differently over the years, and by his own admission, he's certainly pushed the boundaries, but he wouldn't have it any other way.
Did I look after myself as well as some of the others? Probably not, but you know, I think I got the best out of my career and the best, you know, out of my life in these last 15 years. So I've probably been lucky. I've had the best of both worlds. I've been able to sort of do what I want, sort of off the field, and you know, play some decent footy on it as well.
And just like the announcement began, it finished with a joke. This was him talking about his ill-fated 2016 season.
I guess losing me and Jamie this year didn't help. You know, there's probably 70, 80 goals, and I'm not sure what Jamie would have kicked. No, but,
As for life after football, first will be a gap year in 2017. A lot of that will be spent travelling in Europe, and after that, he's opened the door for a career in the media.
Thank you, Jules. Indeed, what a career it was. It was certainly befitting a Collingwood press conference, wasn't it? In 258 games for the Pies, he won the 2010 Premiership and was All-Australian every year from 2009 to 2013. Swan's crowning individual achievement, of course, was the 2011 Brownlow, but also he claimed the 2010 Most Valuable Player Award as voted by his peers. And Chief AFL reporter Jake Nile is with me now to go through what was a great career by one of the great characters in the game. Jake, hello to you. What's some of the lasting images that you remember of Dane Swan?
Well, one of the first ones, the Anzac Medal was mentioned there in 2012, and you recall that in that game, Dane Swan had been criticised prior to that game for being a bit overweight. And as he kicked a goal, and he had about 40 and kicked a couple that day, as he kicked a goal, you know, we'll see it here, he just gives his tummy a little rub, and it was just a little way of telling people, "I'm not too bad." And that was just, it was just that even as he played, there was that little bit of cheekiness. Another one that springs to mind, when Collingwood won the 210 Premiership in the grand final replay, yep. Of course, he kicks a signature goal at the Ponsford stand end where he just comes into that open goal. And I think it's the moment in the game where you can see from the scores there that St Kilda weren't going to make up that gap. And it was a bit of a celebration already. He was the player of the competition that year. I think that was a better year than his Brownlow year. He was the MVP of the comp and he was Brownlow favourite. I often think Brownlow favourite is more impressive than Brownlow. Another one I think that comes to mind is the 2007 Brownlow count. And famously, when Dane Swan was first taking off as a great player in the comp, and Collingwood were just out in the preliminary final, and he was leading the count, which was won by Jimmy Bartell. He finished pretty high up there. He was leading the count, but he wasn't at the Brownlow. He hadn't been invited, and he was at a party wearing a Spider-Man suit. And that sort of was typical of the Dane Swan careers, that while everyone else was making a big fuss, he was just getting about having a drink with his mates and having a good time. And I think he did things as an old-style player, as his father said.
Dane Swan will be remembered as one of football's most colourful characters, a champion on the field and a larrikin off it. After 258 games, the Brownlow medalist and Pies premiership hero has called it quits, his body unable to recover from a shocking foot injury he suffered back in round one.
Friends, family, past and present players, Mick Malthouse, Nathan Buckley and Eddie were all on hand for the Swan song, and he didn't let anyone down.
Pretty big crowd for a one-year deal, isn't it?
Sadly, though, it was the end, the emotion getting to his dad.
Well, I'm just happy for him that he's happy in the decision he's made.
Drafted number 58 in 2001, he performed better after dark than on field in his early years, until Malthouse stepped in.
I thought I was going to be sacked, and Mick just sort of said, this is your last chance, which since I've proven him wrong, so I've had more than one since, but...
When your son gets drafted, you see his photo in the paper, you think, oh, this is fantastic, and having your kids in the paper, but then after a while you just dread opening the paper and...
Swan leaves the game a premiership player, Brownlow medalist, 5-time All-Australian and 3-time best and fairest.
He's one of the greatest players in the history of this club. He's the player of his generation.
The premiership was a clear career highlight from what he can remember.
We sang the song, and that was, at the moment, because then obviously, the alcohol kicks in and stuff, and it's a bit hazy the next 6 months, but...
After hanging up his boots, Swan says he will take time out to travel the world. He'll look at a possible media career and give back time to those he loves the most, his family. He had hoped to play on, but couldn't recover after breaking his foot in round one.
I still haven't kicked a footy on it. I don't know whether that's mental or it feels like if I kick a footy, my foot would smash into 1,000 pieces.
His skill and humour will be missed.
I guess losing me and Jamie this year didn't help. There's probably 70, 80 goals, and I'm not sure what Jamie would have kicked. But,
Michael Felgate, 7 News.
Football maverick Dane Swan has drawn the curtain on his colourful career with a send-off to remember at Collingwood headquarters. So revered as the Brownlow medalist, the occasion even brought Mick Malthouse and Nathan Buckley together again. Clint Stanaway was there.
This was a Swan song like no other.
What's this announcement?
Pretty big crowd for a one-year deal, isn't it?
A farewell, but also a homecoming of sorts. Mick Malthouse back in the Magpie nest to see off one of the game's most charismatic footballers.
Just one of those players that I'll always remember because heart and soul, a lot of things that a lot of people don't know that I know about him as far as his makeup.
But in a media conference akin to This Is Your Life, few stories were left untold, including the moment back in 2003 when a brawl almost ended his career.
I thought I was going to be sacked, and after that blow I got into, and obviously got to the meeting, and Mick just sort of said, this is your last chance, which since I've proven him wrong, so I've had more than one since, but...
A clean skin when he burst onto the scene. One Magpie in particular knew Swan had plenty of swagger.
I laughed when I saw him walk in the first day. He just looked like somebody out of the streets of Glasgow. Had that Scottish walk about him, in case somebody was going to come around the corner with a knife, in case he was ready to go.
Almost immediately, Swanee became a favourite with the fans and his coaches.
Wouldn't want to give the impression that he actually cared or tried, but that's in fact what we saw internally.
There's 3 or 4 blokes that stand out that never argue with an umpire. He's one. If the whistle blew, he looked where it was, which direction, because you've got to do that.
That's how you win Brownlows, Mick.
In his colourful 258-game career, the 2010 Premiership was by far a standout. Swan also made his mark with the Brownlow in 2011. Plus, there were 3 Copeland trophies and 2 Anzac Day medals. Through 14 years, Swan never chased the spotlight, but was never far from it. Only now, it all seems worth it.
For all the whinging and moaning that I do about AFL, I'm under no illusion that I'll never have a better job in my life.
Every bit entertaining, this goodbye also had a touch of emotion.
We all would have loved him to keep playing, but he's got to think of his health, and he can move on to the next phase of his life with him and Taylor, so hopefully that'll be great for them too. Yeah, so that's it.
As for the future, Swan joked it probably involved a gap year, most likely in Europe, before returning to take on a greater role in the football media. Regardless, it seems he won't be lost to the game altogether. Plus, there's a book on the way and a documentary due for release in October. But what about tomorrow's newspaper?
My career's over now, so just write how good I was tomorrow and then leave me alone, yeah.
Clint Stanaway, 9 News.
Good evening. One of the AFL's most colourful careers is over. To the surprise of no one, Collingwood champ Dane Swan announced his retirement his way, with a tinge of emotion, a lot of laughs, and a farewell message for the media. Rob Waters was there.
A contradiction to the end, the apparently publicity-shy Dane Swan retired with an hour-long showbiz-type tribute, but he wants the fanfare to end.
But in the end, my career's over now, so all the people at the front of the papers, can you please leave me alone?
With his family front and centre, his proud dad, Billy, broke down.
Yeah, so that's it.
But the jokes soon flowed.
When your son gets drafted and you see his photo in the paper, you think, oh, this is fantastic, and having your kids in the paper, but then after a while you just dread opening the paper and thinking, oh, God, he's not on the front. He's not in the paper again, is he?
The shocking foot injury not only ended his career, he says he won't be able to run properly for at least 12 months.
You know, surgeon said it's never going to be the same again. I still haven't kicked a footy on it. I don't know whether that's mental or it feels like if I kick a footy, my foot would smash into 1,000 pieces.
Swan did the almost impossible and put Mick and Buck side by side. Collingwood's Cold War thawing temporarily in tribute.
He wouldn't want to give the impression that he actually cared or tried, but that's in fact what we saw internally.
I don't think there's too many blokes that have got the amount of pride he's got. There's 3 or 4 blokes that stand out that never argue with an umpire. He's one. If the whistle blew, he looked which direction, because you've got to do that.
That's how you win Brownlows, Mick.
The president's tribute was short and spot on.
He's one of the greatest players in the history of this club. He's the player of his generation.
Humour dominated his farewell.
And I guess losing me and Jamie this year didn't help. You know, there's probably 70, 80 goals, and I'm not sure what Jamie would have kicked. But,
and despite a career in the spotlight, he's held a lot back.
Only the people that, like I said, in the front 2 rows and my close friends will really know the real me, so you know, you can draw your own conclusions.
And with that, his first act as a former Collingwood star was a few beers at a pub with his family. Rob Waters, 10 Eyewitness News.